Hello, 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 and welcome to the newest and the 80th, 80th, no 80th episode of Borderline Podcast Disorder. It's me, Levi. I'm recording this on the same day as I'm editing this on the same day as I've recorded the episode with Joe. So I'm going to be very short with the intro. Um, but I had the chance to connect with Natalie, who's a October 7th Nova Festival survivor. And then we got to talk about her experience since then, and we got to talk about her, and we talked a little bit about Purim as well, just because it happened for us to record the episode this Friday, or the Friday before, when we're celebrating the Purim or observing the Purim. I don't know was the correct terminology. I apologize. I want to say celebrating. It's a celebration, right? Um, but yeah, no, we got a chance to speak. Although she's just been in London. It just didn't happen for us to be able to meet up in person. She's been super busy, and you'll hear it from her. She's been super busy with loads of commitments. Again, around UK, around London last week, and then um, now that she's in America, we actually managed to get the time and synchronize to actually be able to record this, and it's been such a blast, honestly. It's been such a great experience to speak with her, and I hope you enjoy this as much as I enjoyed recording it. And yeah, look, for everyone who's been listening to um, this podcast, I appreciate you folks, and I hope you enjoy this little, I want to say, present for the again 80th episode. I didn't think we're gonna get here. Well, no, I'm lying. I kind of wished I did. No, that was a lie. Okay, yeah, I wished I did get here. I just didn't really think it's gonna be like this. I don't know if that makes sense, but it's more to say that yes, some of the people, such as today, are people that I did not think that I would have an opportunity to speak with, and never mind be able to take time from their busy schedules to actually record this, and put it together for other people to listen to. This is what I mean by it. And yeah, I appreciate everyone who made this possible, from the people listening to the people um, who have been guests in this podcast. And yeah, look, enjoy the episode, and yeah, I'll see you at the end. Well, you're here from me at the end. I don't think you can see me through this, but you got my point. Perfect. So, Natalie,
Yeah, hi,
how's
Levi.
things?
Do you pronounce it the typical way, or is there like a Romanian version of Levi?
No, it's weird. So my Romanian name, it's Liviu,
Levi. Okay.
but my mom, when I was a kid, my mom used to call me Levi,
I like
and
Levi. Levi
then
is like the modern version of Levi.
yeah, but then I feel like when I do comedy and when I go, like this thing, when I started doing comedy, and then when I first came to England, I was telling people, oh, my name is Liviu, and everyone would just like butcher the name. And I
Yeah,
think at one point, although again I'm all for, like, being proud of your like name and everything, but I was like, I'm not gonna waste like 5 minutes of my life having to
yeah.
explain to someone how to spell it. So I was like, okay, I give up. It's Levi, and
I
then
had a kind of a similar experience. Oh, sorry.
no,
I'm so
please,
bad at
please,
interrupting people. It's the ADHD. No, continue.
that's
Continue
absolutely
what you're
fine.
gonna
Don't
say.
worry. That's it. I was just gonna say I got like tired, and I was like, "That's it. It's Levy."
So I had a not really a similar experience, but growing up, my mom, when she wrote my name on my birth certificate, she wrote it from right to left instead of left to right because like she's Israeli and I guess she was tired, and it's really stupid. In America, they make you write your baby's name on the birth certificate like right after you give birth, and you're like so out of it, and like people fuck up their kids' names all the time. So she wrote it right to left. So she meant to name me Natalie Raquel, but it came out as Raquel Natalie. She like wrote it the wrong way. And then she raised me as Natalie, but then when I started school, I would always have to tell my teachers, like, no, it's not Raquel, it's Natalie, please call me Natalie. And like, it would take like months for them to like remember. And I remember, I think it was like my senior year of high school, and I just got so tired of telling people that my name is Natalie and not Raquel. So like half my teachers, I told them that I'm Natalie. The other half, I was just like, fuck it, they can call me Raquel. And then for a whole year, I had two teachers that thought I was my own cousin because my last name is Sanandaji. Like nobody else in the school has my last name. So they thought I was two different people, and they thought that I was like my own cousin. And like they would talk about me, and they'd be like, yeah, this student Natalie Sanandaji, and she'd be like, yeah, I have this student Raquel Sanandaji. And then at the end of the year, they both come up to me and they're like, we can't fucking believe that you're one person. Like we've been talking about you this whole year, and you're just one person. I'm like, yeah, that's me. But
I feel like this.
it's my multiple personalities. I have a name for each one.
I was gonna say, I feel like it's from what I heard and like what my doctor told me, it's not good to have to like allow the multiple personalities. Although I kind of feel like this with again like Levi, because Levi, I feel like it's my, you know, I go to like synagogue name, and then I'm being just like, you know, doing like nice things in the community.
Well,
Then
no, it actually makes sense because they say knowing different languages, you actually have like a slightly different personality in each language. And it's really true. It like brings out a different part of like your culture and like a different aspect from within you. So like, let's say I have a friend who's Ukrainian. When she speaks Russian, she's way more like sarcastic and like fuck everything and like whatever. When she speaks English, like her grandma taught her when she came to America, she was like, listen, like these other American kids, they are established here. They have families to take care of them. Like they have a good reputation here. You have to build yourself from scratch. You have to be very organized and very this because like Russian or Ukrainian girls have a reputation for being this way and that way. And like, you have to be like overly like careful. So like when she speaks English, she's more like put together, careful, whatever. And then when she speaks Russian, she's like her silly old self that she was back in Ukraine. So like I really do feel like the different names for like the different languages, it really brings out a different part of your personality.
Well, there you go, because you see, like that's the thing with like Liviu, I do just like a lot of like Romanian bureaucracy, you know, and like when I get like my passport change or whatever, and then with like Levi, like it's kind of like I can just do stuff and I just like get away with it. Like if I send like an email that's like, you know, very like borderline aggressive at work, they're like, oh, it's just, you know, Levi does this
it's sweet old Levi.
Yeah, it's okay, he's a comedian, you know, don't worry about it.
Funny.
So I very much again I can see that, but I also feel like it's kind of nice when, you know, because you're talking, because I think you were saying you're first generation American. So you see, I feel like when we have like those names that say like not English, you know, and you go, or like again even just a foreign name, say in a different culture, you can get away with so much stuff. Because I almost feel like it's the same thing where like, you know, when I get a credit card, it's Liviu, you know, Popovich,
no,
but then like
except for
it's
me,
someone else pending.
I'm fucked because my last name in Iran, they're like our very typical Jewish-Persian last names. My last name is very Muslim. There's only two Jewish families with my last name, and one is mine and one is this other family. So I not only experience anti-Semitism, I experience Islamophobia. And I'm not kidding. At the airport, I'm like fucked from both sides. It's not fair. At the airport with TSA, with like the airport security in America, if they open your suitcase and they do a, you know, quote unquote random check, they have to leave you like it's almost like they leave you like a little love letter. Like, hey, like this is the TSA, we checked your suitcase, like whatever. When I fly, like there were like, I remember there was like a year where almost every time I flew, I got checked by the TSA.
No way.
And personally, like a lot of people are very like against what's it called when you check someone like based on their background, profiling, racial profiling. Yes. I'm not against racial profiling, and I get racially profiled, so I think I can say that without getting canceled. I get racially profiled, and I'm okay with it because at the end of the day, there are certain places where majority of like the terrorists and the people committing terrorist attacks come from. And if I have to be racially profiled to protect the rest of the American people, that's okay with me. Racially profile me. It's fine. You're not going to find anything. I just have like 20 skincare products in there that are really heavy, and my suitcase is always overweight, and you can check my suitcase. I don't give a shit. But like literally, I experienced both anti-Semitism and Islamophobia because of my names, and it's pretty funny.
This is amazing because I feel like yeah, luckily I think without well, this is the thing because actually I feel like when I tell people that I'm like Jewish, because this is the thing, technically I didn't grow up like, actually I grew up in a Christian community. I didn't even know that I have like Jewish ancestry until like later in life.
Yeah.
Every time, but the thing is, when I tell people I'm like, oh yeah, I'm Jewish, they're like, okay, makes sense. But otherwise, I'm just kind of like I'm Romanian, you know. And I
Well, yeah,
actually
I feel like
remember
Romanian Jews were like persecuted. Like, there's not the most, right? There's really not many of you. I feel like, or at least I
it's
don't meet a lot of Romanian Jews. Also, like because of conversions. Like my friend, one of my best friends, who's from Ukraine, she also didn't find out she had Jewish heritage until she moved to America when she was like 15, and that's when she found out that she came
same
from
at
like a
14.
lineage of like rabbis or something. Like, yeah, she had no idea because she grew up really with no religion because it was post-Soviet Union Ukraine. So everyone like either converted or really didn't practice anything. Like she celebrated Novi God, which is like the Ukrainian New Year. It's like Christmas, New Year
The
thing.
1 2 weeks, yeah.
Yeah, they're like it's just not a religious culture. So like she didn't know at all.
I used to take time off for everything. I used to tell my at school, I'd be like, yeah, this is Christian Christmas, and then I'll be like, oh, actually, I have the Russian Christian Christmas, and then like every single holiday, I'll be like, yeah, my family is celebrating it.
It was so funny. I remember in middle school, I grew up in a town that was like 75% Jewish. Growing up, I didn't realize other schools didn't do this, but my school, every Jewish holiday was considered a legal excused absence. Like it wasn't considered like you're taking time off from school, it was a legal absence. When I moved to Florida and I went to public school, I realized that other schools don't do that. But I grew up pretty lucky and it was considered an excused absence. And I remember one time in middle school, my teacher was like, everybody raise your hand if you're not going to be in school tomorrow because of Yom Kippur, because of the fast. So everyone raises their hand. And then this one black kid and this one Asian kid raise their hand. And my teacher goes, you guys don't celebrate Yom Kippur. You're not Jewish. And they go, that's so racist. Like what? Because like I'm Asian and he's black. Like we can't be Jewish, blah, blah. And they didn't come to school. Like majority of the school didn't come to school because it was like, what, you're going to tell us we're not Jewish? Like, how dare
There you
you?
go. Yeah. That's the thing. My dad found out. Well, this is again, it's like totally unrelated to anything. But I used to get an extra like allowance on my the benefits thing that you get at school in Romania.
No, what is
Like
that?
because you get like a bit of money like every
I don't know
month.
anything about Romania.
No, but I mean like because I think maybe there is an American version of it where you get like
Yeah, there's benefits for like people who don't make it. Like let's say my mom is disabled, so she doesn't work. So we used to get like this thing called SNAP benefits where it's like basically like food stamps. Like you get like discounts on like foods and like things like
yes.
yeah, stuff like that. Yeah.
So
Okay, I know what that is.
I did that from basically since I left until I left Romania, like for 2 or 3 years without my parents knowing.
What? At what age?
I started at 14, and then from 14 till like 16, I just kept on like claiming those things. And then at one point, I think my mom went to school. I think actually as she was no, my dad went to school because it was at the time when he went to like pull my papers because like, oh, I'm moving to England. You had to like take and then they were like, oh, by the way, the last portion of like the benefit money is gonna come at the end of the month. But that's like the what?
That's amazing. You're definitely Jewish. You're definitely Jewish.
And my dad was like, the what? And he's like, and my dad, because he didn't want to like make a scene, he was like, oh, okay, thank you very much. Thanks for letting me know.
That's
And
amazing. I love that he went with it. He didn't want to
yeah, and
get you
then
in trouble.
in the car, my dad was like, can you explain? And I was like, this is, and it's like, when did you start doing this? And I was like, oh, only like last month. He was like, sure. And then it turns out he took me to the bank because basically I forged his signature on everything. And it turns out like, 'cause he found out I had a bank account since I was 14.
It's amazing. I
Yeah.
love that. That's so
No,
good.
it was. He did again. He was a bit annoyed, but it was fun. It was again. Yeah, I just thought it was quite hilarious. And then I came here. But no, that's the thing with the name. I enjoy it. And I see what you're saying about the again like being like checked like at the airport, stuff like this. Although I was like, after I remember, maybe what was it, like 2012, 2013, where there was like loads of like terrorist attacks in Europe. There was like Paris, I think it was like France, Germany, England. And I remember just being so terrified of like everything. And then I remember I was taking a very like cheap flight to Romania, and I was so scared. I was like, what if, like this is the airplane that's gonna blow up? And then I was like, hang on a minute, this is like Romania, I was like, I'm going to like a little town in Romania. I don't think, anyone who wants to prove a point and make a statement, would go like, oh, where is this, like the cheapest airline? Where is the Ryanair flight to Bucharest?
Honestly, my name could have helped me if like let's say like a lot of Jews didn't feel safe going back to Iran after the revolution because of like their very typical Jewish last names. Like it would be too obvious that they were Jewish. But because of my last name, I always thought to myself, I'm like, you know what? Like I would love to visit Iran. Today I can't do that because I actually have like a fatwa from the Islamic regime of Iran, from the IRGC.
No way.
I'm not the highest on their list. I'm definitely not the highest on the list, but I'm on the list. They like sent me a fake invitation to The Hague to try to lure me to Europe to like kidnap me. They've done this to a lot of people who speak out against them. I've spoken to like other activists who've received like similar invitations. But yeah, like today I'm definitely on their list. I could not get away with it. But like back in the day, I could have gotten away with like going to Iran.
Seriously?
Like, yeah.
When did that happen?
It happened last year. So like more in the beginning of my activism. They like sent me this fake invitation to The Hague, and I answered them. I was like so excited. I'm like, oh my God, I'm gonna go to The Hague, because I was getting a lot of invitations to speak, and I still do, to speak in a lot of different places. So I was like, why wouldn't I get an invitation to The Hague? Like, sure. And then my boss, last November, like a month into the war, I started working for the Combat Anti-Semitism movement. And my boss was like, Natalie, like this seems a little suspicious. Like their invitation doesn't seem so organized. Like this is The Hague. Like they would be more organized. He was like, stop answering. And then someone else told me that they got a similar invitation, and they asked the Mossad to like look into the invitation, and they said that it came from Iran. So I was like, yeah, I'm on their list.
No way.
Yeah.
Wow, this is pretty cool.
Yeah,
although I have no relationship with Iran whatsoever, but I still feel quite like, wow.
Yeah. And they also did like a hit piece, like their official news channel did like a hit piece on the organization I work for. And they've never spoken about us before. And then when they did it, my boss like sent it to the whole team, and then he sent it to me separately, and he was like, I'm so proud of you. And I'm like,
no way.
Yeah, it's pretty cool, because when I had a podcast, it was me and my co-host. I had a podcast for 6 years called Persian Girl Podcast, and we would talk about like what it was like growing up in the Persian communities in America. And we would always joke that like our biggest goal and dream in this world is to have a fatwa from the Islamic regime of Iran. I never thought it would actually happen, but my biggest dream has come true.
Wow, nice.
Like, I told my co-host, and she was so jealous. She was like, I can't believe you did it.
No way. This is amazing, because the only understanding I had of like the fatwa is from like the Curb Your Enthusiasm.
Exactly.
Like,
yeah, that's where we got it from, because we always joke that my co-host is basically the female Larry David. She really is. Like, if you see it, like the way she interacts on a daily basis, like she really is the female Larry David. So like she really came up with the joke. She's like, Larry David has a fatwa, I want a fatwa. And I was like, yeah, I also want a fatwa. And then I really got a fatwa. So be careful what you wish for.
Wow. Imagine the Fatwa the musical with Natalie Sanandaji.
That'd be amazing. I'm gonna make that happen.
If you have like Lin-Manuel Miranda as actually that would be funny if he plays the Ayatollah.
Yeah,
because you have
honestly, this is a great idea. I'm gonna write this down.
Thank you.
We have to make this happen. I'll give you
I'd love
credit.
to be that's it. I was gonna say I'd love to be a producer if possible.
Yeah. Oh my God, definitely. You're hired.
But now I wanted to ask you this thing, because you're talking about like how you started, because you started working for the combat anti-Semitism movement.
Should I introduce myself to your listeners? Should I tell them a little bit
Let's do
about
that.
myself?
Yeah, because
Okay.
I was basically gonna ask you, like, how did you get to work for the? But yeah, let's do that.
So my name is Natalie Sanandaji. I was born and raised in New York, growing up in Great Neck in Long Island, which is a major Jewish-Persian community. And my mother was born and raised in Israel. Her parents are also Iranian. My father was actually born and raised in Iran. He was actually in the army in Iran before the revolution, so the Shah's army. And I actually recently did 23andMe, which is a genetic testing like website thing, and I got 97% Persian. So I before I go into my whole life story, I'll just tell the listeners a little bit about Persian Jews. Since we're also recording this on Purim, which is a Jewish holiday about a Persian Jewish woman who saved the entire Jewish nation. So I'm very proud. So basically, most Jews, when we were exiled from Judea the first and the second time, they had to move around a lot. They could never stay in one place for too long. And that's why a lot of Jews have like when they do genetic tests, they have like 20% Polish, 30% Russian, 50% like Latin, like all different types of things, because they had to flee persecution so much. But actually, the Jews who made their way to Persia, which is modern day Iran, they stayed in one place and lived in peace there for centuries. From the first time we left, we were exiled from Judea. So when I did that genetic test, I wasn't even that surprised that I got 97% Persian, because I already knew from like my family's stories that we were really there from the first exile, that like I'm actually like a descendant of Queen Esther, you know, like we were really there from the beginning. So very Persian, but as the daughter of a mother who was born and raised in Israel, I would go to visit Israel almost every year my entire life. And the summer of 2023 was no different. I was in Israel for a friend's wedding, and then I extended to be with friends and family for the holidays. And as someone who loves house music, I love to go to what we call nature parties in Israel, Mesibot Teva, which are parties that take place in the desert or in the woods. And I found myself at the Nova Festival. I'll maybe give a little glimpse into that day just for the listeners, but basically found myself at the Nova Festival. I ran from gunshots, from Hamas chasing me for about 4 hours until me and my friends were finally saved by a very brave man named Moshe Sati, who found us and picked us up in his pickup truck and drove us to his hometown, which was at the time one of the nearest towns to get to safety, that people knew the Hamas terrorists did not infiltrate yet. Got to his town, ended up getting home, and as soon as I got home, I really realized, even as we were running, I realized, you know, everyone's body has a different reaction to difficult situations, and my body's natural reaction was to disassociate, to really protect myself from like the intensity of the situation. Before the attack started, me and my friends were sleeping at the festival. These festivals, you bring camping gear with you, because usually they go from like 24 hours to 3 days, and you bring like chairs and tents and sleeping bags and whatever. So I was sleeping before everything happened. You know, a lot of people were on certain substances. It just so happens I was sleeping, so I was completely sober, and my body went into a state of action. And as we were running, I was having like a full out of body experience, to the point where at certain points when they would start shooting at us again and everyone would start running again, I would stand still and I would watch everyone run past me, because I had convinced myself in my head that I was not in my body. So I like fully believed that like even if my body got shot, I would still be alive, because I was having a fully out of body experience. So I realized in the days after the attacks that I was still disassociating and I wasn't feeling all the emotions of like what happened. And I really considered it like my superpower. And because I felt that it gave me the ability to share my story without breaking down and crying and re-traumatizing myself over and over again. And I realized that most people were not in the same position as me. I realized that most people were probably way too traumatized to talk about what happened. So as someone who survived, I felt that I owed it to all those who didn't survive, all those who were murdered, all those who were taken hostage, all those who were too traumatized. I felt that I owed it to them to be their voice and speak out on their behalf. And I also understood that, like, as one of the only Americans, I had the English to really communicate the story to the international audiences. So I really wanted to take it upon myself to like be their voice. Also, I didn't live in Israel prior to this. I didn't go to the army, so I couldn't go back to reserves. So I thought, like speaking out and being their voice was my only way to like give back to the people. So I started interviewing for different news channels about 4 days after the attacks, actually exactly 4 days after. From there, because I was one of the first survivors to start speaking out, the Combat Anti-Semitism Movement, which is a Jewish nonprofit based in the United States, but we have an office in Israel, and our teams are really spread out all over the world, in South America, in the US, in Israel. So they reached out to me to go to Washington, D.C., and they set up like a whole day for me to meet with senators and tell my story. And about a week or two after I went to D.C., they reached out to me again and asked me if I want to work with them full time. And I said yes right away, because I already knew I couldn't go back to my old job. I couldn't go back to a job where on a daily basis I had to focus on something that wasn't October 7th and the rise in anti-Semitism that's happened since then. So I got this incredible opportunity to continue with my life and to continue working and go back to like a schedule and not fall into this deep hole of depression and be at home. Because a lot of the survivors, they couldn't go back to work. They couldn't go back to focusing on something that wasn't what happened to them. And a lot of them still haven't gone back to work. And then they kind of fell into this deep hole of depression because they were home all day. They were like overthinking about everything that happened. So I got really lucky. I got this amazing opportunity, and I've been working with them since then. And it's been an incredible experience.
That's amazing. But then, the first question is, 4 days after October 7th to already kind of, because you're talking about like the sort of like the wait, how to say, out of body experience, or like like what happened while you were running away for your life. But then after that, like how, because again, that's a short period of time, no? Like, because you're kind of like to digest such a thing.
So I was conscious of the fact that I was still disassociating. I was conscious of the fact that I felt zero emotion towards what happened. I would tell my story like almost like a robot. And in the beginning, I was actually afraid about that, because I was worried that because I was telling my story with no emotion, that people wouldn't care as much and they wouldn't understand the severity of the situation. And it made me worried, but I was like, I'm not going to fake crying just to make people care and listen. But then I started reading some of the comments and like listening to the comments that people would tell me about my interviews. And they would actually tell me that because of the fact that I wasn't getting emotional and I wasn't crying in the middle of my talking, and that I was talking so clearly and like, and just like very calmly, that it actually made it easier for them to digest and to listen to what I'm saying. So I eventually realized that it was a good thing that I wasn't getting overly emotional. But yeah, I felt like zero emotion at that time. I realized I was still very much disassociating. And then over time, I didn't even realize I was healing my own trauma by interviewing so soon after. But for that first month, I was doing 4 to 6 interviews a day, 5 to 6 days a week. So I was repeating my story over and over and over again. And then a few different like trauma PTSD professionals reached out to me, and they told me that I had actually, in a sense, healed my own trauma by repeating my story over and over again so soon after. They said that that's actually one of the major tactics they use to help people heal their traumas, to force them to repeat their story over and over again until they become desensitized to their own story and it loses all meaning to them. So I actually went from disassociation to desensitized. The
That's
word
okay.
for being
Yes.
desensitized, whatever the fuck it is. You know what's funny? People will always comment and be like, "Wow, you have such amazing English." And I like look at them and I'm like, well, I would hope so. It would be really horrible if I didn't, because I was born and raised in New York. And then like people are always shocked. People are like, wait, you're not Israeli? Because I think people automatically assume like if you were at this festival, there were people from all over the world, but the majority were Israeli. So people just like always assume I'm Israeli, and they're like, wow, your English is so great. I just like look at them and I'm like, well, if it wasn't, I think
You'd
I would
hope
be
so.
in big trouble. That would be a major problem.
Schools in America are not cheap, so you'd hope the English is
I
good.
did go to public school, but I actually went to the top 100 public schools in America. But really, like, American education, the notion that, like, American education is, like, the best in the world is such bullshit. Like, we really do not, we're, like, really low on the list of, like, good education.
This is the thing. Well, actually, again, that this is very off topic, but actually, I think which I feel like every time you hear, especially in England for some reason, especially more recently, England, when people speak about America, it's kind of like, oh yeah, the educational system is really bad. You know, and I'm like, hang on a minute, you know, because it's this notion of like, no, if you're in America, you don't learn anything. You're almost like you just go to school to just be there physically, and then you just get a certificate. And I'm like, this does not sound real.
So something I do want to say about American education, because this is something I talk about in a lot of my interviews and like my public speaking, is the fact that it's been proven to me, and I fully believed this even before it was like physically proven to me, the majority of the anti-Semitism in the United States right now is fueled by lack of knowledge and ignorance. Because truly, we don't learn anything about Jewish history in our public school education system. And I think that like we're not going to see a real change in the percentage of anti-Semitism with the younger generations until we change the public school curriculum. Because like I even remember I remember in high school when we were learning about World War II, the extent that we learned about the Holocaust, which was a huge part of World War II, was that the Holocaust happened. That was it. We didn't talk about the number of Jews that died. We didn't talk about the final solution and where it came from. We didn't talk about the fact that before the final solution, there was all this propaganda against the Jews, and that they actually tried to send the Jews from Germany to the United States, and the leaders in the United States sent them back and said that we don't want them. We didn't talk about any of this stuff. And anything that people do learn about the Jews is the Holocaust. They don't learn enough about the Holocaust. I think we need to add more about the Holocaust. But also a problem is the fact that they only learn about the Holocaust. And that's where this notion comes from, that Jews are Eastern European and that we're actually white supremacists and that we actually come from Europe. We don't talk at all about the Middle Eastern Jews. We don't talk about where Jews originated. We don't talk about like the mass murder of Jews in Iraq, in Syria, in Egypt, in Morocco. We just don't talk about like any of these things. And I realized that when I left my community, because I grew up in a community that was a huge percent was Persian and 75% in general was Jewish. So I was like the most basic thing in my community. And then I got to college, and when I would tell people, because to most people, I'm pretty ethnically ambiguous. Like people never are really sure what I am. I'm Brazilian, I'm Indian, I'm this, I'm that. Like nobody ever really like can guess correctly. And I remember in college, people would ask me like, oh, where are you from? And I would say, oh, well, my parents are Persian and Israeli. First thing people would say is, oh, wow, what is it like being from like having parents from two different countries who hate each other? Then I would have to explain to people that these countries don't hate each other and that it's just the post-revolution and Islamic regime that took over Iran, and it's the government that hates Israel, but the people don't. And like I have to go into all of that. And then they would ask me, oh, so you're Jewish and Muslim. And then I would have to explain to them that actually the Jews were in Persia, which is modern day Iran, for over 100 years before the Muslim religion ever made its way to the region. And like it's just like all these things that I realized in college how much the public school education system has failed us. And then I just realized it even more since October 7th. So yeah, our system sucks and we need to change it, is basically what I'm trying to say.
You see, this is the on the back of what you were saying. This is one of the things that, well, again, I also feel, because I studied primary, secondary, and high school in Romania. Mm-hmm. So it was actually quite weird, because in Romania, again, like we learned about the Second World War, we learned about the Holocaust. However, because Romania was actually, like as you've mentioned earlier, not very friendly to Jewish people, they are kind of like, yeah, there used to be loads of Jews here. And I'm like, okay, and where are they? Don't worry. They're not here anymore, like, oh, okay, how come? Don't worry.
Yeah, don't worry about it.
Yeah, and then years later, you go like, oh, there is because this is the thing, like growing up, there was only one family in my town that was actually like observing Jews. The synagogue, I used to go there because they used to have the key and they used to babysit me a lot, and I would go to the synagogue. But I've never like been to service because there was no enough people to have a service with, all this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And then yeah, you kind of like hear it where he's like, oh, because I remember even like with my dad and my mom, they'll be like, oh, you know, this bakery or like this again, this shop used to be like owned by so and so. This friend of ours, like my dad's first car was an Audi, which was given to him by his best friend because he made Aliyah and he went to Israel and he was like, just take my car. I don't want it because, you know, like he just basically like went to, but then you're kind of like, oh, but then where is everybody else? And they're like, yeah, you know, things happen. Like, okay, fair enough. And then you learn about like the pogrom. Like actually, I didn't even, I've never heard like in my, I haven't heard.
You want to hear a really horrible joke about where the Jews went?
No, please do. Actually, yeah, sorry, I would like to. Sorry, please do. Yeah.
Somebody sent me this meme and it was like, what's the difference between Jews and Santa Claus? They go in opposite ends of the chimney. But a Jew sent it to me, so it's okay, right? Sometimes I look at these memes and I'm like, it's only funny if a Jew made the meme. Like if a non-Jew made the meme, then that's just fucked up.
Yeah, it's a bit.
But that's where they all went. In case you want to know where all the Romanian Jews are.
You see, this is the thing, and it's kind of like because also, you know, with history, because I love, I'd like to think I love history. I try to be, you know, as informed as possible. But then again, you kind of learn like, oh yeah, Germany did all these bad things, Germany, and then like, okay, but then why didn't we like stop them, or you know? And then you learn that, oh, actually, our prime minister was like friends with Hitler, and then he was, you know, on that, and you're like, but then again, you don't learn this at school. You
that's why
kind of like,
history repeats itself, because we don't teach people these things, and like people don't realize that the Holocaust did not start with the final solution. It started with propaganda, the same way that we see propaganda today. And like you see all these patterns and you realize that these patterns are happening because nobody's learning enough about real history. And like I remember when my friend, my Ukrainian friend, moved to America, and she came to our school and she's sitting in world history and they're teaching about World War II, and they said that America liberated the concentration camps. They didn't talk about the fact that actually Ukrainian soldiers were dying by the like hundreds of thousands fighting this war until America swooped in at the end and was like, oh, okay, we're going to save the day now. Like, they didn't mention that at all. And she like raised her hand and she was like, are you guys fucking kidding me? You're not going to talk about Ukraine and everything and the huge like part that they took in this war? Like, it was yeah.
You see, it's stuff like this where you kind of again, it's always interesting. I find it very interesting to keep an eye out and to kind of like keep an open mind where you're like, hey, although I've only seen this thing a couple of days ago actually, which said that history is not for you to like. You know, history is like, it just exists. Like, you shouldn't perhaps like teach history in such a way that or you like or you don't like. No, it's stuff that happened and you have to be factual, and it's about like how you move on. And I was like, yeah, that makes sense. Cause, you know, again, it was quite, but that thing, yeah, it was quite funny or like interesting growing up. And I was like, like, again, you just
It's
ask all
also
these questions.
dangerous. You know the quote, history is written by the victors. Like history is written by those who are victorious, and then they write it in their favor. That's also dangerous
Yeah.
because in certain parts of the world, history is written differently.
But
And
then
because
also,
they write it to their benefit. And that's dangerous.
but I think actually history is written by, unfortunately, this is the thing. History is kind of like written by everybody, because I think you say that history is written by victors, but actually, I used to have these jokes with, I think only yesterday or the day before, I met a good Romanian friend of mine, and we were laughing about how we have this emperor in Romania who everything we learned about him is that he was victorious and he always beat the Ottoman Empire. But then we were like, hang on a minute, because that doesn't make sense. And if we beat the Ottoman Empire all the time, why did we have to pay money to them every month? Why did, you know, and then you relearn it and you're like, oh, hang on a minute, actually he won like 10 battles out of 200, but then in school, you know, you only learned about those 10 battles. And he's like,
That's
oh,
so
he's
funny.
the greatest. And he's like, no, because again, like that's the thing. I don't know, say again, if you're like, yeah, watching sports, you know, if you're like, you have like such a like terrible like shot like points per shot percentage, nobody's going to keep you in the lineup.
Yeah.
But then in Romania, it's kind of like, no, we're just going to talk about the good shots.
Yeah.
So yeah, all these shots went in, and that's like, yeah, but how many times did you have to try to win? Don't worry about it. All you have to remember is we won.
Also, people like only want to believe the parts of history or the parts of certain religions that like feed their narrative. Like literally, I was just like looking this up today because I was like, I just want to see what it says. Because when I was thinking about like, like a lot of my speeches talk about the fact that this war is not actually about Israel versus Palestine. It's actually about the IRGC, like the Islamic regime of Iran, and all of its proxies versus all Western civilization. And like I go into this whole thing. But I wanted to see what the Quran actually says about Palestine and Israel. And I just like looked it up because obviously I know the answer, but I wanted to read what it says in a lot of places online. And I, like the protesters don't even look this up because if they looked it up, I think they'd be shocked. It says Bnei Israel, children of Israel, are mentioned. Well, over here it says 20, but some places it says 34 times in the Quran. In other words, in every instance in the Quran in which the word Israel occurs, it is only in specific context, providing that Islam deems Israel and the indigenous territory of the Jewish people, their rightful inheritance and property. Palestine is not mentioned in the Quran because the term Palestine is a construct of the Romans to humiliate the vanquished Jews whose land they renamed was named the land of Israel that they stole. There never was a sovereign Arab state known as Palestine. It was the land of Israel, stolen by others. So basically, like it's saying that the Romans named it Palestine to kind of like laugh at the Jews after they took their land. They're like, haha, like we took your land, now we're going to name it something that represents like something that's going to humiliate you, like your enemies that were against you. It's like this whole thing, I'm just like, people like are choosing not to Google things or like choosing to like not believe things that don't match their narrative. And I feel like we even do this in history classes, which is ridiculous because like you're teaching the future generations. Like how can you teach the future generations things that only match your narrative as opposed to the truth? Like you said about like these like 10 victories amongst 200, or the fact that in US history class we're not like we're actually pretending like America saved the world from World War II. Meanwhile, we only swooped in at the end. It's just it's something that we need to change, and I don't know how long it's going to take to change it. I know that there's people who are working on it, and I'm at least happy about that, but it definitely needs to change if we're going to see like any change in anti-Semitism here in the States.
I feel like this is going to be a nice segue onto the thing that I mentioned at the beginning that I wanted to talk about, which is, basically for context to everyone who obviously didn't listen to what we talked about before pressing record because they couldn't. I was going to say that I saw I think what was it like last week as we speak when you posted this like thing about like boiler room sending you an email on, hey, buy this like t-shirt that says like free Palestine on it, and then that's like us being super, again, like our like way of activism, or this is what we stand for, sort of thing. And then you were saying something earlier just now about how people kind of they just want, because actually I agree with you, where I feel like one of the most shocking things I've noticed in the last 2 years is this sort of people coming up with stuff like, hey, I just want to learn, but then it actually sounds like they just want validation, because it's kind of like I want to learn, but I want to read or hear the exact same thing that I'm saying. Otherwise, if there is something that's challenging what I'm saying, I don't really want to listen.
Yeah.
And then it's almost, again, this thing of like, if you're, say, because you talked about like loving like house music, like festivals and things like this, which I do to an extent. I was going to say, I don't like staying overnight, like sleeping in a tent. I don't find that very pleasing, I'm being honest. But that's for a different...
It's understandable. It's
yeah,
understandable.
that's the part where I was like, oh, and
I actually posted something today on my story. It says, unfortunately, I'm scared to go to therapy because what if they fix me and I can't go on multiple day long benders anymore?
Yeah, you see, I mean, I don't mind day long benders, but I want a hotel room.
Okay,
I want an
that's
Airbnb.
fine. That's fair.
Yeah, that's the bigger problem. But now, you see, coming back to what I was going to ask you in a very long-winded way, as I noticed while I say it. Is yeah, so basically, you there are all these things that we like to do, you like to do, you're going out, and then it almost feels like everything gets politicized sometimes. I don't know, I just feel like unnecessarily, and it kind of like makes you raise questions, because I remember, and I know from my own experience, you go to a comedy venue, but then you're like, you guys posted some weird stuff last week. I don't know, do you like me? Do you not like me? am I okay here? Like, do I have to maybe not tell people who I am, or like, where I come from?
So I want to go into a few points.
Yes,
In
please.
regards to your long-winded I'm going to give you a long-winded answer, okay? So first of all, this email I got from Boiler Room, I'm going to read a little bit from the email to you. They wrote, after nearly a year of development, we're proud to launch our collaboration with FC Palestina. 100% of the profits from this jersey, it's basically like a soccer jersey that says Palestine on it, will go to the Samir Project, an aid initiative supplying food, water, shelter, medicine, warmth for the people in Gaza this Ramadan. So, okay, first of all, let's go into the fact that it has been proven on many, many, many occasions that any of the aid that's supposed to go to the people of Gaza is taken by Hamas. Okay? If this aid was actually going to people who need it, I would not have an issue, obviously. One of my friends actually commented on this, which was pretty funny. She wrote, my favorite part will forever be the people who want to supply warmth for people currently living in 73 Fahrenheit, 23 degrees Celsius weather. It's hysterical because during Ramadan, it's actually very hot in the region. So what warmth? Okay, that's just one point. But then it really goes into this point of, the house music industry really turned their backs on the people at the Nova Festival. And a lot of people's excuse for turning their backs on us is they will write the same comment over and over again. People tend to like to just regurgitate the same quotes that they hear on TikTok over and over again without actually doing any research about it. And one of the major quotes was, "We hate you guys because why were you guys partying next to an open air prison?" Okay, let's talk about this. First of all, Israel left Gaza, literally took its own people, the Jewish people, and pulled them out of, there's like videos from 2005 where they pulled the Jewish and Israeli people out of their own homes to give Gaza to the Palestinian people. Okay. And the Israeli people who were living in that part of Gaza were very upset. They were yanked out of their own homes by their own police force to give it to the Palestinian people. So Israel left in 2005, okay? So if anyone was making the area into an open air prison, it was the people who were in charge of the area, which is Hamas. Okay, now let's talk about the wall. If you look at Israel's wall between Israel and Gaza, which Hamas broke through in 6 different locations on October 7th in order to surround us and attack us, it was a barbed wire fence, as opposed to, let's say, Egypt's wall, which is really intense and very strong and very thick that they cannot break through. So if anyone is making this into a prison, it is not the people with the stupid little barbed wire fence. It's, let's say, Egypt, okay? That's first of all. Then secondly, okay, so we pointed out the fact that it wasn't an open air prison at the hands of Israel, right? So why shouldn't we be allowed to use our land to party on it just because it's next to an enemy? Because I even remember when we got the location, because at the end of the day, we had the party on our land and it's next to a neighbor. Every part of Israel is next to a neighbor who doesn't like us. Like I remember when we got the location. No, because when we got the location of the party, so in Israel, typically with parties like these, they don't give you the location until about like an hour or two before the party is supposed to start for security reasons. So I remember when we got the location and my friends told me where it was, I was like, oh, that's very close to Gaza. Like, should we be nervous? They looked at me, they're like, Natalie, yesterday you were hiking in the north by like waterfalls and you were you were on the border of Lebanon. It's like, what, you're also not going to go to the north and hike? Like, you're not going to do this? You're not going to enjoy any part of Israel? You're only going to stay in the center the entire time that you're like, it's a ridiculous like idea and like concept that we should only stay in the part of Israel where it's not near one of our neighbors.
Fair.
So that's one thing. And then a lot of people like asked me like after the festival, like if I was scared to party again, if like how was it possible for me to go so quickly back to partying? Wasn't I traumatized? Blah blah blah. It's actually my answer to this is actually, I think, gonna surprise most people, that when I go out to party at clubs or at festivals and like nature parties within Israel, it's actually the only time where I'm not nervous. And for me, it's a very sad fact personally for me, because whenever I would go out with my friends, I was always known as that friend that when I'm on the dance floor, I'm oblivious to anything that's happening around me. Like almost every time we would go out, there would be some weird guy like creeping on me from behind, and I would have no idea. And suddenly, I remember one time my friend literally picked me up and moved me to the other side of him. And I looked at him like, "Why are you doing? Why are you picking me up?" And he's like, "Natalie, there's been a guy behind you for the past 10, 15 minutes trying to like touch you and creep on you, and you had no idea. And I kept trying to push him away. I didn't know what to do anymore. So I just picked you up and I moved you." And I was like, "What? Like where? What guy?" And that would happen to
No
me all the
way.
time, because for me, like when I go out and then when I'm on the dance floor and when I'm enjoying the music, it really just becomes me and the music. Half the time I'm dancing with my eyes closed, and I'm really just like let go of all thoughts and let go of all like anything, and it's just me and the music there. And suddenly I find myself in a position where anywhere where I go out, whether it's in the US or in Europe, I find myself overthinking on the dance floor. I find myself looking around and thinking to myself, like, oh, if this person or that person knew who I was and knew what I stand for, and knew what I survived, and knew what I speak out against on a daily basis, would they hate me? Would they try to hurt me? And it even happened recently where I was at a music festival in Amsterdam, and it's this thing called ADE. It's like a week long like music festival, and like every day there's like 20, 30 parties they could go to at different clubs. And one of the days there was a party in a park that people threw. It wasn't really like a organized party. And we went to this party and suddenly we saw like Palestinian flags everywhere. And we realized that we were like at a pro-Palestine party. And I remember looking at my friends and I was like, I don't know if I feel so safe. Like I had my hostage pin on my bag, on my like fanny pack. And I was like, if they knew who I was, if they knew what I survived, would they try to attack me? Would they try to hurt me? And my friends were like, no, you're being ridiculous. Like you're overthinking, blah, blah, blah. And then 3 weeks later, these Israeli soccer fans were beaten in the streets of Amsterdam just for being Jewish, just for being Israeli. And then I realized I'm not overreacting. Things like this do happen and can happen. And a lot of the time, I don't feel safe on the dance floor. And then something similar happened in Budapest. I was at a music festival, and it was also like a week-long festival, and like there was graffiti all over the place of like Zionists not welcome here, Viva la Gaza, Free Palestine. And like once again, like I feel like the music community has really turned their back on us, and like it's very upsetting. And actually the only time these days where I feel 100% free and comfortable on the dance floor is when I'm in Israel, the place where I was originally attacked.
Yeah, which is I think even the thing with the
I don't know if I even answered your question, but did I answer the question?
I'm not sure, but I feel like you kind of did, because I think you've answered like what does it feel like,
Yeah.
again, enjoying things that say, again, yeah, like look, EDM, you enjoy like going out, right? And then you have a lot of people in say even in that industry, whether it's the musicians themselves or whether it's the venue, that you're going to, that now finds it almost like appropriate to pick a side in everything, or like even no, you just in everything. I'll just be even more straightforward in this.
In this
say
conflict
when you don't really
can't
understand.
we agree that death on either side is horrible? And then also like my question to like, let's say a lot of the pro-Palestinian like movement people is, where were you before October 7th? Because if you care so much about the innocent Palestinian people, like I always say, like, if you care about them, then you should be against Hamas, because Hamas is just as complicit in the deaths of innocent Palestinians as they are in the deaths of innocent Israelis. They've ruined the living conditions for the people in Gaza before October 7th. So where were you before October 7th? Why are you only angry when it's Israel that's trying to protect itself? And then it goes into like so much more than that. It's like, okay, if you care, let's say it's not just Palestinians, let's say you care about Muslims in general. Why don't you care, or like Arabs in general? Like, why don't you care about like all the Syrians Christians that are currently being killed by terrorist organizations? Why don't you care about the women of Afghanistan that like legally can't talk to each other in public, and that the legal marrying age is 9 years old? Like, where are all the protests about all these horrible things happening in the Middle East? Why do you only care when it's Jewish people dying and Jewish people trying to protect themselves? Like, why is that the only thing that pisses you off?
And I think it kind of goes hand in hand to something that you said earlier about how, this whole idea of like the education not being good, because you see, that's when then now, again, such as living another Holocaust or, ethnical cleansing and stuff like this.
Or when they call Jews Nazis, I'm like, how can you call a group of people the group of people that tried to annihilate that group? Like, that's crazy. It's like calling, let's say, African Americans plantation worker, like plantation owners or slave owners. You can't call a black person a slave owner. That's ridiculous. That's insane. Like that. It drives me crazy. Like, people need a major history lesson, like world history. We need to write out all of world history the right way and teach it to everyone the right way, because what's happening today is just proof of lack of education and like a horrible education system.
And as well as I feel like it's this idea of, again, it almost takes away from the meaning of the word, sorry, because it's kind of like, when something starts and you're like, yes, it's again, like, say again, a Holocaust has happened, and now if you call, it's almost like if every inconvenience it's a Holocaust, or like every inconvenience it's like, a Nazi, every person that causes me an inconvenience now becomes a Nazi, then it almost again takes it away, and the word loses value.
Yeah.
Because you think about all these, like, say, people who died during the Holocaust. You think about, like, again, actual Nazis who are still, some of them got away with it because they managed to just flee the country and just, stay in hiding and stuff like this. And now you're going from those people to, just going like, oh, my neighbor, like, parked in my parking space. What a Nazi. Or, it's, you see where this is going. That's the thing that I find most like annoying. Yeah, where I'm like, bro, like now it almost feels like you're making that word mean less because you just use it every time and with everything without knowing what it actually means. And like you said, even the weight that it brings, like the weight that it carries with.
Yeah, the weight that it carries.
And actually, I think you actually kind of like covered my point, because it was this idea of, like, say you're going to these parties, and I imagine you've traveled to like different festivals, perhaps in different countries or different places for years before October 7th, and I don't know, were you as like oh, I'm like a Persian Jew, like, do I have anything to worry about, or did you actually not have that in your mind almost at all, and ever since you're kind of like, hang on a minute, because if these people find out I'm of like Persian, or again I'm a Jewish descent, they find out that I live in or like I live between like Israel and America or anything like this, now I'm gonna almost like get in trouble.
It's a new reality for me. I was definitely always very I guess I would say naive, and that naive part of me was taken away. My world was flipped upside down. I always tell people that the Nova Festival was almost like this time warp. It was like this like tunnel that I walked through, and I walked into it from a different world, and I walked out into a completely different world. Like if I had known that I was gonna go to that party and then leave that party to a completely different world, I would have like taken a moment to say goodbye to my old world. Like, bye, it was nice knowing you. Like, gone.
Yeah, this kind of stuff where you're like, whoa, and now because I'm very mindful that I promise you that we'll keep this at an hour. I want to ask you a very important question, which is, how do you look after yourself ever since? Or like, how do you, like, have you got anything, because you were talking about before how only like 4 days after October 7th you already started speaking about it. You were talking about like how some therapists, or like some how do I call, like like doctors or like people reach out to you and they're like, oh,
like
actually
mental health professionals.
Yeah, mental health professional, that's the word. They reached out to you and they were like, hey, actually that looks like it's helpful, and again, it's actually a good way to go through, or like to manage better what you've been through.
Yeah.
But then I guess, like, how do you look after yourself, and almost like how do you take time off from this, or like how do you like, again, how do you wind down?
Yeah, I in that first month I definitely overworked myself. I was definitely exhausted. I wouldn't change it. I wouldn't go back and do it differently, because I think it was necessary to speak out as much as possible, and it still is. But I feel very lucky that I got this job, because I think this job gave me the opportunity to not sit down with my pain and let my pain take over me. So like working for the Combat Anti-Semitism movement, it's been an incredible experience. And my boss is very mindful of my mental health. Like I remember in the beginning, because I came back to America so soon, I wasn't in Israel with all the other survivors. So like they started doing like survivor days where they would do like therapy and like days in the park and like try to like heal them with all these like different like healing classes. And I didn't get to be with other survivors. I didn't get to do those things. And I remember like my first time going back to Israel for work, they were doing these trips to Cyprus to this like healing spa for survivors. And I asked my boss, I was like, can I take a few days off to like go to this trip? And he was like, yes, of course. Like your mental health like matters so much to me. And I feel like certain people, they saw the survivors as like a token for them, like something that they wanted to use for their speaking engagements or for their this or for their that to make them look good. And I think I got very lucky with a boss who actually cared a lot about my mental health. And like there's certain organizations within Israel that like give free therapy to the survivors, and like he would really like try to make sure that like even though like I'm working for him and like I'm like doing all these things and I'm speaking, that I'm also taking care of myself. Because he's like, how are you going to continue doing this if you don't take care of your own mental health? So I feel very lucky in that sense because of like organizations like that, and because of like trips like that they've set up for survivors. I had the opportunity to meet other survivors. I know so many other people now that were at the festival, and we have that like bond that I think really helps me, because as much as like my friends, my family were there for me and loved me and like helped me during that time, it's not the same as like being in contact with someone who really knows what you went through and went through the same thing. So part of it is like being in touch with other people who know what you went through, and kind of like, I guess, like trauma bonding, but for lack of a
I
better
think,
term.
I mean, yeah, I think again, I don't know the I guess the trauma bonding version of with like more positive connotations,
Yeah.
but I see what you're saying, because sometimes I think. Yeah, I think actually I was talking with when Shai was on. He was talking about how like finding a therapist, for example, when he needed to speak with someone that's from Israel, because he was kind of like,
Yeah.
how can I speak with someone from America and be like, and how they can be like, oh yeah, I understand, like I
Yeah. Yeah.
understand what you've been through, or so I do. Although I feel like even the word I understand, it has different meanings in different times, because I can be like, yeah, I understand sort of like what you might be going through, I understand what could go through your head.
Yeah.
But realistically, only someone who's been on a similar situation, or even like in this case, almost the same situation, can really have that weight to the words I understand. Because they're like, oh yeah, I was there, or like,
Yeah.
I get it.
Yeah. It's being able to comprehend someone's feelings, and it's being able to like actually feel the same feeling, because and
Yeah.
I even remember I was sitting and having lunch with another survivor, and we started laughing because we both, like, every survivor has like a different feeling about what happened that day. And me and her have the same feeling, that we almost feel like we weren't actually there because of the fact that we didn't have a scratch on our body, that like we didn't, neither of us were like in the bomb shelter. The people in the bomb shelter have a very different experience than the people who were running the whole time. Like everyone has a very different experience. And I guess mine and her experience were kind of similar. So we're like, yeah, like we feel like we didn't even go through anything that bad. And then we looked at each other and we started laughing. And we're like, oh my God, it's such a crazy thing to say, that like running from terrorists chasing you and shooting at you for hours isn't that bad just because you didn't get shot. It's these types of like dark humor and jokes and like understanding that you really can't get unless you were actually there. So I do feel like a huge part of like taking care of myself and feeling better is being in contact with other survivors.
That's very good.
Yeah. Including Shai. I love Shai. I was just talking to Shai yesterday. I love him.
No way. Nice. Is he in
Yeah.
America as well, or is he in?
No, well, he's Canadian, but he actually made Aliyah to Israel like right before the Nova Festival, and he
Yes,
still lives there. So I'll hopefully be back in Israel soon to visit him. I haven't seen him in
amazing.
a little bit. Yeah.
Well, look, thank you so much for taking the time. Now, before we wrap it up, I just wanted to ask you, where do people find you? What are you most active? Stuff like that, basically.
So you can find me on Instagram. My regular Instagram is Natalie Sanandaji, Natalie Sanandaji. It's a mouthful. I also have like my professional Instagram account where I post like more of my speaking engagements. It's my first name and then a dot and then my last name. I'm also on Twitter. I try to be more active on Twitter. I'm getting better at it. And yeah, for now, that's where you could find me. And hopefully, I'll be starting my own podcast soon. So if you follow me on Instagram, hopefully, I'll be posting about that in the near future. And to anyone who ever just wants to reach out and has any comments or questions, I really try to answer all my messages as much as possible. And I really do look at all the messages. So anyone who was listening to this episode and wants to reach out to me, I'm happy to talk.
Perfect. Thank you so much for taking the time. I appreciate you.
Yeah, thank you.
Cool. So, what do you think? I hope you enjoyed it as much as I enjoyed recording it. And yeah, that's it. Because once again, I've been doing a lot of, editing and work and stuff like this today. So, yeah, that's it from me until next Monday. So, we're going back to the normal schedule. I can't remember who's Monday's guest. So, I'm sorry about that. But let me double check actually. So Monday's get okay. So the next episode is going to be with Aisha Amanduri, comedian based in London, and yeah, she's going to be up next. Really excited about that too. And hey, folks, look, enjoy. Enjoy your weeks. Look after yourselves. Weeks. You only have a week. Enjoy your week. Look after yourselves. And from me, Pickle and Sarma, stay skillful. Bye.